Lovely. Okay, tells me it started, which is good. So, thank you very much again for joining on this session. We're going to be spending this next hour online together talking about managing our thoughts and the different ways in which that we can do that. Like I said, this session is being recorded for you. If you have got any comments or any questions throughout, then please do feel free to unmute yourself and just ask them, or raise your hand, or put a comment in the chat. While I'm looking at the presentation screen, I can't always see Teams. So if you have put your hand up and I've missed it, then please do just unmute yourself and let me know, because I might not always see it in real time. So just to talk about what we're going to cover today. First of all, we're going to be looking at understanding why it is that we have these busy minds, what is going on in the brain, and also understanding that this is quite a normal and common experience to have, but really exploring a little bit more the impacts that overthinking can have onto us. But what I wanted to spend the majority of the session on today, the biggest chunk, is really exploring some different techniques that we can use to help us manage our thoughts. Because when we are in that situation, it's really useful to have those tools in our toolbox to manage ourselves in those situations. Okay. So first of all, then just looking, why is it that we have these busy minds? What is our mind doing to us? Why is it putting us through this, where we have these awful overthinking patterns, or these really negative thoughts, or these really stressful thoughts? Why would the mind do such a terrible thing to us? And it's really understanding that this is a very normal function of your mind. Okay. When we have these patterns, when we experience these things, it can feel really isolating. And we can think, well, this only happens to me. Everyone else is just getting along with life just fine, and it's only me. And to reassure you, from my many years of experience of supporting people, everybody at some point in their life is going to really struggle with a busy mind. And the reason is because we lead very busy lives. You know, we have lots of input coming into the mind all of the time. And the mind's job is to analyze all of that input, to risk assess it, to really understand, you know, what are the threats, or what are the potentials, or what are the benefits here. So the mind is constantly processing, you know, all of the time. So when we have a lot of input coming in, it's understandable that sometimes the mind can become really overwhelmed and really exhausted. So it's understanding that it's a very normal function of the brain to overthink, but if it goes unchecked, or the impacts that it can have can be really difficult and really damaging to us. Okay. So just checking that there's nothing there on Teams. Okay, just to make sure I'm not missing any questions. So what can the impact be then of our thoughts? And again, it is that thing, it's not just all in your head. Okay, sometimes when we have these thoughts, we can think, well, it's only there, you know, in our mind. It doesn't, you know, really impact on anything else. But it is something that can impact in lots of different ways. Let me just check. I think that's somebody else trying to join the session there. Okay, I think they're in. Fabulous. So what we have here is a CBT cycle. So if you've ever heard of cognitive behavioural therapy, this looks at the thinking patterns that we have and the different impacts that those thoughts can have. It's not just all in our head. Our thoughts can impact on our emotional health, on our physical health, and on our behaviour as well. So just from this thought, these thoughts can be so powerful in terms of the impact that they have. So if you have a look on the slide here, I've put in an example of a thought that we can often have. So say we get a really difficult piece of work and we're struggling to cope with it. We're struggling to work on it. We're struggling to solve that problem. And from that instance, we can have this thought, oh, I'm too stupid to do this. This is why I can't complete this piece of work, because I'm so stupid. So what are the impacts of that thought? Okay, well, how does this ripple through into different areas. So we can see here the feelings that it can generate, how it can impact on our emotions. So when we have that thought, oh, I'm too stupid, it can make us feel really low and make us feel really miserable and maybe in a bit of distress as well. It can make us feel really self-conscious. We can look at other people and think, well, they get it, they understand it, why not me? Why am I the only one who is struggling? It can make us feel really anxious as well, because we can think, oh my gosh, I'm too stupid to do this. I'm never going to do this work. How am I going to get this done in the time? I'm going to need so much more time because I'm so stupid to do this. What if I can never do this work? What if I can never pass this? What if I get thrown out of university? All of this catastrophizing, that can happen from this one thought. And we can see that these feelings then impact on our physical body. Sometimes that overwhelm can make us feel really tired. We can feel quite tense in the body as well. We're unable to relax because we've got all of this anxiety, all of these subconscious feelings ruminating around within us. And then this can then impact on our behavior. Okay, so we can procrastinate. We can try to avoid that piece of work because we don't like the way it makes us feel, emotionally and physically. We can then maybe overwork. So think, well, I'm so stupid that I can't do this. I'm going to have to spend 20 hours solid, working on this. And, that can really lead to a lot of impact, on our sleep, on our physical health and our emotional health as well. Or we can completely disengage. Well, I'm too stupid to do this. What's the point? I'm not going to do it, because I'll never be able to do it. So we can see how just from that one thought, how it can impact on so many different areas, of our life. So what I want you to do now is, if you have a pen and paper handy, or maybe on your computer or your laptop, whatever it is you're using, just to spend a few minutes just thinking of a thought that you regularly have. What is a thought that often pops into your mind, or maybe a difficult thought that you've had recently? And I want you to see if you can put it into that cycle. So think of that thought that you've had, okay? And then think of the feelings that that thought generates. And then think of, really tune in, how does that impact on your body? What physical reaction does that thought create for you? And then how does this impact on your behavior? What behaviors then ensue because of that thought? Okay, so I'm just going to pause for a couple of minutes just to allow you to do that. If you've got any questions, or if it doesn't make sense at all, just unmute, or stick it in the chat, and I'll do my best to help you. But just so you can get into that idea of what happens when we have those thoughts. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes to have a go at that. All right, how are we getting on with that? Is that okay? Does anyone need a little bit more time, or is that okay to move on? Hopefully that's a useful exercise for you, just to understand the impact that your thoughts can have on you in that way. Okay. Any comments, any questions so far? Okay, I think we're all right. Let's carry on then. So, understanding the impact that these thoughts can have is going to be really helpful for us to have that motivation to want to manage them, and to see and be able to measure the impact that these different techniques, can have on us. But just understanding, the reason of why we have to do this sometimes, we have to use these strategies, and how it can actually help us, especially if we're thinking in terms of the work that we need to do. So just have a little look at this question and maybe just put your answer in the chat, whether you think this is true or false. So thinking frequently about a problem means you are more likely to solve that problem. So if you can just put your answers in the chat there, whether you think that's true or false. So thinking frequently about a problem means you are more likely to solve that problem. Do you think that's true or false? Okay, we have a false. A false. Okay, let's just see some people typing. Okay, yeah, all saying false. Correct. Well done. Yeah, so it is false. The more we think about something, actually, the less productive we are. And what we know from the neuroscience is that the mind can only focus on an issue, a piece of work, a problem for so long and be effective at that. Okay, so sometimes we can fall into that habit, especially when we are coming to our studies, and to our work, when we have a lot to do. We think, right, I need to spend an extraordinary amount of time doing it. But sometimes the more time we get caught in it, we get caught in those really negative thinking loops. And actually, if we can take that step back, if we can give the mind a chance to rest, it is so much more productive. And if we, think of the mind like someone running on a treadmill, okay, so if we're continually running over and over and over on that treadmill, we know that physically we're going to feel so tired. Okay, there's only so long that we can effectively and efficiently run for without having a rest. And the same principle we can apply to our mind. Okay, if we're constantly inputting into our mind all of the time, it's no wonder that we can feel really burnt out and feel really exhausted. Yeah, we need to learn to give the mind, some breaks. Because if you think, we wake up in the morning and then we're constantly adding that input in, if we're not, speaking to someone or doing a job, or on a phone or on our computers, it's that constant input all of the time. And we need to allow time, for the mind to be able to rest, to manage those thoughts, so we don't get caught up in that cyclone of thinking all of the time. So if we can learn those techniques to manage our thoughts, we're going to improve our creativity, improve our sleep, our concentration, our focus, and really support our well-being as well. We're not going to experience that same level of burnout that we might have done before. Okay. So just to check, are there any questions or any comments, so far? We're going to move now into kind of the main chunk of the session of the different techniques, that we can try, to help with this. But just to have that basis of understanding of what is actually going on in the mind when we're overthinking and why it is that we can fall into those overthinking habits. Okay, all good? All right. So we're going to be exploring now a whole variety of techniques. I really wanted to make this session as practically useful, as possible to you, as I could do. Okay, so because I have a wide variety of techniques that we're going to have a go at now and explore, what I want to say is the reason I've done that is because not one size fits all. Okay, we are all so different. We're all so unique. Our minds work in very different ways. So it then makes sense that we're going to need to try different techniques. There's going to be different strategies that might work for one person, but might not work for another, and vice versa. And also, just to say as well that, techniques and strategies can be useful to us at different points in our life. So you might have a technique now that you think, actually, I don't really like that. That doesn't quite sit with me, or I don't really find that effective. But it's still really useful to have there in your toolbox, because maybe at a later point in your life, or a different, thinking problem or overthinking or stressful thinking that you might have, you've got that there ready in your toolbox so that you can use it, in that instance. So it's definitely worth, exploring and experimenting and being curious about all of these different techniques and trying them out, because you never know at which point in your life it might be most useful. And also, just to say as well, with anything, I think, in well-being, there's not one silver bullet. You do this one thing one time and boom, everything is fixed and lovely and life's amazing. It would be great, if we could do that, but it doesn't really work like that. Okay, especially when we are thinking about managing our thoughts, because what we are trying to do here is we're trying to change the habits of the mind. And I'm sure with many other areas in your life, when it comes to changing habits, it takes practice. Okay, it's not something that you do once and then it's resolved. Because there is the concept of neuroplasticity, that we do have the ability to change the mind, but it takes that practice to be able to do that. So if we imagine that we have a meadow which is full of really tall grass, the first time we walk across that meadow, that pathway is not very well defined. Okay, maybe that grass springs back up behind us as we walk past. But the more we walk across that meadow, the more we take that pathway, the more well defined it becomes. And this is the same when we come with our thinking patterns and the neural pathways in the brain. The more we practice these techniques, the more effective that they're going to become. Okay, like learning a new skill. When you first pick up a guitar to try and learn all the chords, it feels really awkward and difficult, but the more you practice, the more naturally it flows. So again, this is what I would really urge you to do, when you're trying these techniques, is to really be open to trying it a few times, and to see the impact, that it has. Okay. All right, let me just check that there's no comments or anything that I'm missing. No, lovely. Okay, let me go back to the screen. So the first technique that I wanted to kind of introduce you to is called the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. And if you've ever heard of Mel Robbins, she's an American speaker. This is a technique that she has popularized quite a lot. And it's basically an auditory technique which is set to interrupt your thinking pattern. So there's something in the brain that likes this 5-4-3-2-1, countdown. It prepares the mind to move to a different activity. So the basic technique, it is very simple, like all of these techniques we're going to be covering, is when you find yourself in that really difficult thinking loop or those overwhelming thoughts, you say out loud to yourself, 5-4-3-2-1, I'm not thinking about that anymore. Okay. And it really is as simple as that. So, it might seem, well, how is that going to work? How is that going to impact? And with all of these techniques that I'm going to share with you today, they're all things that I have used professionally and personally, and have found have worked really well. And just to share with this one, just a bit of self-disclosure with me about when I've used this technique, and to share my experience of it if it's helpful for you, is I used this technique at a point in my life where I was getting very, very stressed in the morning about being late. Okay, like another level of stress. So on a scale of 1 to 10, I was kind of 10, 11, and I would get myself so worked up, about being late, that I wasn't particularly nice, to the people that I lived with in the morning. If anyone dared to ask me to do anything else, I'd be like, my God, don't you know I'm so busy? Like, I'm going to be late. I've got so much I need to do. And it really led to this real catastrophizing. I'm going to be late, I'm going to, get shouted at, if I'm late, it might mean that I'm going to get fired from my job, or everyone's going to think, that I'm really disorganized and that I can't manage my own life. And, the physical impacts, that it had on me as well. I would, sometimes make myself, physically ill because I got so anxious and so worked up about it. And, I noticed that I couldn't really catch my breath, because I was so like, oh my God, I'm going to be late, and that real anxiety and that real panic. And it got to a point where I just thought, I can't do this every single morning. It is exhausting. So this is a technique, that I learned. And I will say the first morning that I tried this, I kind of said to myself, right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, I'm not going to be late. Stop stressing about it. And then it kind of, calmed for a few seconds. And then all those feelings came back up again. So I had to say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It doesn't matter if I'm late anyway. I'm not going to get in trouble. It's okay. And then it kind of abated, and a few seconds later again. So I must have that morning, I think, said 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then a statement, probably about 10 times a minute. It was really, excessive and quite a lot, but it got me out of the door without bursting into tears, which was, a big win for me at that point. And then what I found gradually, like over the rest of the week, the following morning, I noticed, that tension, that tightness, that shortness of breath coming, that overwhelming feelings. And I used the technique, and it seemed to help for a little bit longer, so I maybe, instead of doing it 20 times, maybe did it 10. And then so on and so forth, through the rest of the week, where it's to the point now where I genuinely don't get stressed in the morning about being late. So, and I really do think that technique has just helped me to check in with that thinking pattern and interrupt that thinking pattern, that catastrophizing that can so often happen, with our thoughts. So again, it's a really simple one, to be able to do. It needs a lot of repetition, but it is a really helpful one to do. Okay. All right, I'm going to move on to the next technique. If you've got any questions or comments, like I say, just put them in the chat or unmute yourself. That's fine. Okay, so the next technique that I wanted to talk to you around is thoughts on trial. So this is quite a cognitive behavioural therapy, so CBT technique that we can use. And, this technique is very useful to help us understand what is a thought and what is a fact. Because sometimes the thoughts that we have, we sometimes forget that they are thoughts. Just because we think it, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. And if we forget that, then those negative thinking loops can become even more intense, and even more overwhelming. So with this thoughts on trial, it takes this very, legal approach where we look at that thought and we really dissect it, okay, well, what is the evidence for this thought? What's the evidence against? And then weighing it up, to see what the final judgment is, is it a thought or is it, a fact? So if we, go back to that original kind of thinking cycle, where we had that thought, oh, I'm too stupid, let's, insert it in here and see, what we do. So we have that thought, okay, so I've got this really difficult piece of work. I've had this thought, I'm too stupid. Okay, so I'd write that in there. What is my thought? I'm too stupid. So what is the evidence that I've got to support this thought? Okay, well, I'm really struggling with this piece of work. Does that necessarily mean I'm stupid? Well, maybe I'm not that clever. Okay, so I'll write down I'm really struggling with this piece of work. Another bit of evidence for, I got some feedback, last week on a piece of work, which said I needed to improve, on X, Y, Z. Okay, I've got that. I had a piece of work last month that I also really struggled on. I was in a lecture and I didn't understand something, so I had to ask my friend, about it. Okay, well, that could indicate that I'm stupid. All right. What's the evidence against? Well, actually, I asked a friend, that question, but the week before they'd asked me a question because they didn't understand anything. So, and I was able to answer it, so maybe I'm not too stupid with that. I got that, feedback, from that supervisor, but another supervisor gave me really positive feedback about a bit of work I'd done and said I'd done it to a really high level. okay, well, the exams I took last year, I got really high grades, in that, thinking, okay, well, I'm a student here, Cambridge, one of the most prestigious and well-respected, universities that only accept, the kind of the best students. Okay, I don't think I'd be here if I was really that stupid, so maybe, that's an evidence against. And then I kind of, weigh it up and think, okay, well, this is the stuff for and this is the stuff against. So what's the final judgment here? I think really, yeah, I'm finding this piece of work hard, but does that necessarily mean that I'm stupid? Maybe it just means that I'm finding this piece of work hard. Okay, so I'm not stupid, I'm just finding this hard. So what do I need to do to help me? Maybe I need to go back to my supervisor and say, I don't really understand the question, or maybe I need to kind of speak to a friend, or maybe I need to go and read something else, to help me. All right, does that make sense? Can you see, how you're kind of dissecting that? Because it's almost as if we can just, remove that thought, then we can see the problem more clearly for what it is. Sometimes the thoughts kind of get in the way and cloud it. Whereas if we just kind of get rid of that thought, or, just kind of see it for what it is, that it's a thought, it's not a fact, then we can have a bit more clarity and be able to move forward a little bit easier. Okay. So what I want you to do now is, again, I'm just going to give you a few minutes, to be able to do this. Take that thought that you'd put into that thought cycle and, try and do this thoughts on trial activity. Okay, so thinking there, what is that thought? So write it in there. Okay, what evidence, have I got to support this thought? What evidence have I got against this thought? And then thinking what the final judgment is. Okay, so I will give you maybe 3 to 4 minutes, to have a go at that. If there's any questions, you can stick that in the chat there as well. Okay. So I'll just give another 30 seconds or so pause to do that. Don't worry if you don't completely finish it, but I just want you to have that flavour and that understanding of what those activities are. Okay, all right. Does that make sense? Are there any questions, any comments? How are we all doing? We okay? All right. Lovely. Okay. Um, let's move on because I want to allow times, to pause for you to try things out, but I also don't want you to have to just stare at my face, either as we're going through. Um, Okay, so the next one we're going to do again is a writing one, which is quite good, to do on the page. But also, this is one that you can do as like a voice note or a recording. So this is called Rage on the Page, and it is very much, what it says on the tin. In that, what we are doing is sometimes when we have those thoughts, they can be so negative, and so, powerfully angry, and we can try and suppress that a little bit, can't we? When something has happened and we're really annoyed and frustrated about it, society often teaches us you shouldn't be angry, you shouldn't shout at people, don't, say what you really feel. And, we have to all get along, so it can be very difficult to do that. But sometimes if we're trying to ignore that feeling, if we're trying to ignore that negative thought and just trying to push it away, just get rid of it, it becomes even louder and even, bigger, like the white elephant in the room. So this technique is just a really good way to express that emotion, express that negative thought, really get it down on a page, and then you can just destroy it afterwards. And it's that really physical demonstration of letting go. So say we go back, to that original example in the thought cycle, I'm too stupid to do this. Maybe we're thinking, God, I'm so angry, at my supervisor for setting such a ridiculously hard piece of work. How on earth do they expect me to be able to do that in the time that they've given me? And we can just feel really frustrated and annoyed about it. So we can just spend, a few minutes just writing it down, just getting all of that out. And again, it just helps to get it out there. So it's almost as if, right, that's done. Now I can move on, and now I can get down to actually what it is that I need to do. So this is, again, just a really useful technique to help us really identify, what that thought is and what it might be that is holding us back. Again, this is a technique that I have used. I found it really helpful, to be honest, really cathartic, just to be able to let that go, think actually, yeah, I was really annoyed about that, and I've, it's developed all of these other thoughts, going on in my head, but it really comes down, to that initial bit of annoyance. So that again is just a really good technique to let it out. Okay, so we're going to move on to a couple of techniques I've kind of grouped together now in terms of using breath work. If this is not something you are familiar with, or maybe you use breathwork in different parts of your life, breathwork is a really good technique to be able to use when we are really struggling with a busy mind and overthinking. And the reason why it is so good is that sometimes inadvertently, when we have these difficult thoughts, these negative thoughts, this overthinking pattern, we can inadvertently set off the body's internal alarm system. So, this is our autonomic nervous system, which is a really, primal automatic system that we have in our body, which is from our very earliest evolution, which has kept us alive and kept us safe as a species, right? So it's really, really useful. It's great at keeping us safe, but sometimes, we can set it off as a false alarm. So when we have these busy thoughts, when we have these really overwhelming, these really difficult thoughts, it can stimulate that automatic system that is that fight, flight, or freeze response, which I'm sure you've all heard of. And that is the sympathetic nervous system that kicks in. So sometimes, when we notice those physical reactions, maybe, we're short of breath, maybe we're really tense. That is kind of the autonomic nervous system kicking in, to make us, ready when we're breathing, like, so that we're ready to run, we're ready to fight, if we can do. Sometimes I find personally, if I've got a lot of thoughts, going on in my mind, I stop breathing. So I kind of hold my breath, and that's kind of, my freeze response. And you might notice that sometimes when those thoughts are really there, it's like, and you can't, like, and you forget to breathe almost, because that's that automatic, system coming in. So the body is obviously excessively clever, and very good at what it does. And it's amazing that we have this automatic, system that kicks in, that keeps us safe, and it's great. But it's automatic, right? So if it's a false alarm, and it's an automatic reaction, what can we do to stop that, really? Do we have any control with that? And the body, in all its cleverness, has created a bit of a backdoor. As all systems do, it's really useful to always have a little backdoor, to go in. And breathing techniques are that really useful backdoor, because as well as our sympathetic nervous system, we have our parasympathetic nervous system. So our sympathetic nervous system is there for that fight, flight, freeze response, to keeping us safe. The parasympathetic is there for when we can have moments of relaxation, where we can be calm, we can be still, we can heal, and this is often where we find a lot of our creativity, when we're in this parasympathetic nervous system, because we have the space, we have the ability to be creative and to explore. So breathing techniques are a really good backdoor to ignite that parasympathetic nervous system, to signify, to the body and the mind, it's okay, I'm safe. We don't need to be in that threat response, because when we breathe in a really slow and measured and controlled way, we are signifying to the body that we're okay, rather than the or the holding the breath, in that freeze response. Okay, so we're going to have a look at a couple of breathing techniques now. And again, these might be ones you be familiar with. And again, these are just really useful to use if we're finding, those emotional and those physical responses to that thought are quite overwhelming, or it's really impacting on our behavior. It can be useful to help us come out of that threat response, but also it can be a really useful breaking of that thinking pattern. It can really interrupt that, and it gives us that moment to pause and think, okay, this is what's happening to me. So the first one that we're going to have a look at is called the box breath. So I'll explain this to you initially, and then we're going to try have a go at doing a few rounds of it together. So you can either visualize it in your mind, or you can use something, that's square or has, 4 sides. Anything, that you prefer, whether you prefer to imagine it or have something physical. So you basically just start by tracing, the 4 sides of that square. And as you trace it, we're going to breathe following that pattern. So you can see, on the graphic here on the screen. So as we go up, we breathe in for a count of 4, and then we hold the breath for a count of 4. Then we breathe out for a count of 4, and then we hold the breath for a count of 4. And you just go around in that pattern. Okay, so you'll notice here that I've said 4 counts rather than 4 seconds, because everybody's lung capacity is very different. And if you are really in a moment of distress, actually breathing in and holding for a count of 4 seconds might not be possible. It might be something that you need to work up to. And also just in terms of your level of comfort, so that you don't feel uncomfortable or you don't feel like hyperventilating, use it at a count that feels right for you. Okay, so we'll have a little go at this now. I will guide you through a few rounds, and then I'm going to let you self-guide, to experience it as well. Okay, so just make sure that you're sitting comfortably, to begin with. If you want to close your eyes or lower your gaze, you're welcome to do that, or keep your eyes fixed on the screen. Just either getting that physical kind of square in front of you, or imagining it in your mind's eye, and starting at the bottom left-hand corner. And we're going to breathe in, 2, 3, 4, and hold your breath, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4. And just do a couple more rounds yourself, just following that Same flow in your own count, breathing in and holding, breathing out and holding. And then just finishing the round that you're on. If you had closed the eyes or lowered the gaze, just bringing the eyes back up again. Okay. How are we doing? Any questions, any comments? Is that okay? All right, so these breathing techniques are ones that you can use quite discreetly, so they can be, really helpful maybe if you're out in public, or maybe, especially if you're sitting in an exam, I would say breathing techniques are always really useful just to help regulate, yourself and stop that thinking pattern, from going on. So another technique that I wanted to share with you is the 7-11 breath, otherwise known as the slide. So I'll explain it to you and explain why it's sometimes called the slide. It depends whether you're quite a visual learner or not. So with the 7-11 breath, again, it's very much what it says on the tin. All right, so you're breathing in through the nose for a count of 7, and then you're breathing out of your mouth for a count of 11. So you can see me doing this rhythm already, because this is the way that I do my breath work. So with the slide, when you're breathing in, you're imagining that you're climbing the steps of a slide. And then when you're breathing out for 11, you imagine that you're very slowly kind of going down the slide there. Okay, so again, it depends which way your brain works. I really like a visual cue, some people prefer not to. My little suggestion with this is that when you breathe it out for the count of 11, that's quite a long period of time. So if you just go, it's like, oh God, I've still got 9 counts. How has that happened? So if you really purse your lips and make your mouth really small, so like that, it just takes longer for that breath to be able to come out. And again, you'll notice I've used a count rather than seconds, because this, can be quite challenging, to breathe, in and breathe out for this length of time. So again, just use, the count that feels most comfortable for you. So again, we're going to have a little go at this. I'll guide you through a few rounds, and then I'll let you self-guide, on that. Okay, and again, with each of these breathing techniques, you can do as many rounds as you need to do. It might just be that 1 or 2 rounds is fine. It might be that you want to do it for, a bit of a longer period of time. And it's a very individual thing. There's no one set rule that you need to do it for so many rounds for it to be effective. It is very personal to you. Okay, so let's make a start then. Again, just sitting comfortably. You can close the eyes and lower the gaze if you want to, or keep the eyes open. And we're going to start off with that breath in through the nose. So breathe in, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Out through the mouth, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. In, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. In, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. In, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And just do a couple more rounds on your own count. And just finishing the round you're on, letting the breath come back to that natural rhythm. And then just reopening the eyes if you'd closed them at all. All right. So these are a couple of breathwork techniques. There's lots of different types of techniques that we can explore and we can try as well. And sometimes it is just a case of finding the one that feels right and feels most natural for you. So moving on, we've just got a couple more techniques that I want to cover before we finish. And the one that I'm going to include here is mindfulness. If you don't know, I'm a mindfulness teacher, so mindfulness is something that I'm very passionate about, and it is a proven scientific technique to help with that overthinking, and especially in terms of overthinking that can lead to anxiety disorders and also low mood and depression. So if we imagine, if we go back to the mind as that analogy of us being on a treadmill when we're just running and running and running and running all of the time, and that input into the mind is there constantly, we develop these overthinking, patterns, these negative thoughts, these feeling overwhelmed with all of the input that's going in. Mindfulness really is a way to just take a step back and just to pause and notice and just allow the world to to go past us. So it's almost as if we are just, taking a step off the path for a moment and giving ourselves a moment just to be. So what I would really say with mindfulness is sometimes there is a misconception that to practice mindfulness that we need to sit in the lotus position, we need to meditate, for a minimum of 30 minutes a day. Otherwise it's not going to work, it's not going to have any impact. And if you're anything like me, I would love to have 30 minutes every day to be able to sit and do a meditation, but life is busy. We've already established that. That's why we have busy thoughts, that's why we have a busy mind. It's really hard to fit that extra thing in. So I'm a mindfulness teacher. I would say do a longer meditation of maybe half an hour once a week, if that, within my own my own mindfulness teacher, my own community. But otherwise it's maybe 2 to 3 minutes a day, if that. And what the point I really want to make as well is that we have our formal kind of sitting meditations that we do, but we also have our informal practices. So this is stuff that we do every day, but just doing it in a more mindful way. Okay, so what I mean by that is maybe when you're walking to a lecture, or you're walking to the shops or something like that, how often do you actually focus on the physical process of walking? Probably not very often, because your mind is thinking, oh, well, this is what I'm going to buy from the shop, or after the lecture I'm going to go and meet them, blah, 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 and all of these things. And the physical things that we are doing, mindfulness essentially is thinking about the thing that we are doing. So maybe when you are walking somewhere, really notice those physical sensations of your feet against the ground. What does it feel like to walk in this moment? What does the body feel like? What does the breeze feel like against the skin on my face, or kind of through my hair? What sounds can I hear? What traffic or what birds? Is there a sound that I like, or is there a sound that actually I dislike and kind of sets me on edge? And it's all these practices of just noticing, and doing that. So mindfulness, again, it is that really useful technique for that neuroplasticity, for rewiring the brain and the thinking patterns. Because what it helps us to do is, it's like a little gym workout for the brain. We practice these different things so that we can take a step back and notice. So that when we come into those real life situations where there's a lot of input, our thoughts are really busy, lots of stuff is going around in the brain, we already have that muscle memory that we can take a step back and notice. So again, with the thoughts and not facts, thoughts on trial technique, we can notice what is a thought, and actually where it's leading us to. So I hold a weekly mindfulness session on a Wednesday. It's a 1 to 1:30. It's normally in the Wilkins room. This week it's online on Teams. So in the Eventbrite page, you'll see a link there if you want to join. If that time isn't good for you, but it's something you want to explore a little bit more, or learn how to to put into your life, or use this as a technique going forward, then we can arrange 1-to-1 sessions for us to do that as well. This is a service that we offer you as a college, and we can do that in person, or we can do that online as well. So I wanted us to just have a go at a mindfulness practice. So this is just a 1-minute practice that is available on YouTube. It's just a headspace mini meditation. And what I would suggest you to do, as I'm playing this, just to really, come with it with a beginner's mind. When you just take this pause, what is it you notice? What is going on in your thoughts? What is going on in your body? How are you feeling emotionally? And it's not to judge, or to criticize. You shouldn't, necessarily come up and think, oh, I feel so relaxed now. This is amazing. It is more just that practice of noticing what feels right for you. Okay, so let me see if I can get this to play, and we'll give it a go.
So sitting comfortably, just taking a big deep breath in through the nose, out through the mouth. As you breathe in, noticing how the body expands. As you breathe out, just watching the body soften as you gently close the eyes. And rather than the mind leading the breath, allow the breath to lead the mind. Notice the sensation of the breath. Notice it where you feel it in the body. If you need to, you can just gently place your hand on the stomach. And just following that rising and falling sensation. Nothing else to do. Allowing thoughts to come and go. And when you're ready, just gently opening the eyes again.
All right. Hopefully you could hear that. I'm just had a paranoid thought then that I didn't set it that you could hear the audio, so hopefully you could. If not, again, it will be available there on the recording and on the link for you, and it's available on YouTube. So again, that just shows this 1 minute, right? It's not an extensive, really, long practice. It's something that we can do just to allow, that pause within the mind. So just coming up to the last few minutes now, just one more technique that I want to share with you. And this is something called flow states. So this is a concept developed by positive psychologist called Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. And this is basically the concept that to manage the thoughts, if we have really busy, kind of overwhelming thoughts, if we can give our full attention to one activity and really immerse ourselves, in that experience, then it's almost as if everything else just fades away. We can take that break from the overthinking and from those difficult thoughts that we have, because we're so absorbed and involved, in another activity. So, this is sometimes creative activities, can really help us do that. Sport, can help us do that. Sometimes listening to music, we can get really absorbed, within that activity. For me personally, it's paddleboarding. I'm a really keen paddleboarder. I find the moment I just kind of get on my board and push away from the bank, it's like I'm in the middle of the river and nothing else can touch me. I'm so focused, on the water. I'm so focused on not falling in, because that's a real danger with paddleboarding as well, and everything else just seems to just pause. So it is maybe having that bit of curiosity, thinking, what activities do you do, or what could you maybe try that can just really help, get you in that flow state where everything else just disappears. And this is quite a fun thing to do, right? You get to experiment with lots of different fun and exciting and new things. What is it that you can try that just completely, you can absorb in? And it doesn't have to be something that lasts, for hours. It might be something that's really, short, like just eating a really nice piece of cake. You're just so absorbed in the deliciousness of all that sugar, for example. Again, that's a very personal flow state, for me. Okay. All right, so those are the different techniques that I've tried. We're coming up, to the hour now. Again, I've tried to include as many as possible, to make it as useful for you, and also understanding that different techniques might support different people at different kind of points in their life. And I just want to, end with a little bit of a note of caution. Sometimes when we have these overthinking patterns, or we have these overwhelming thoughts, we can instantly want to get rid of them. We see them as something negative. Get out of my way, it's stopping me doing the things that I want to do. But sometimes it's not always a negative thing. Sometimes the mind is trying to bring attention to something important, something that we need to focus on, something that is going to keep us safe, that is going to keep us well. So what I would really urge you to do, is of course, try these techniques, and see how they help you manage. But if you need that bit of space to talk through those thoughts, to understand, to unpick them, or just to help you manage them, if you think actually this is not something I need to fully get rid of, this is something that I need to unpick, and manage, then please do, get in touch with me, and we can book a one-to-one, and I can offer you that support, whether it's with me or signposting you to somebody who can help you with that. But again, it's not one of these things that we tick off and then we're done. Okay, sometimes we need that further investigation. All right, so just end off with a thank you. Thank you very much for joining. I hope you found that useful. Like I said, I'll send you a copy of this recording, and I'll also email you a copy of this presentation. So you've got those techniques there. You can have that as a resource for you that you can refer back to in the future. If I can support in any way, if you want to practice these techniques together, if you weren't sure of something or you want to spend a bit more time on something, please do email me. I'm here to support you. Okay, so please do make use of me, and I'll end the recording now. So thank you very much.